It was a warm Saturday afternoon in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Pinewood Heights. Residents were enjoying the weekend, tending to their gardens or relaxing on porches. Among them was Linda Walker, a middle-aged woman known for keeping a watchful eye on everyone in the area. From her front window, Linda noticed a black man unloading boxes from a moving truck in front of the apartment building across the street. He was dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt, working steadily as he carried items into one of the units. Linda's eyes narrowed. She didn't recognize him, and in her mind, that was enough to raise suspicion. "I don't like the look of this," she muttered, reaching for her phone. Within minutes, she was on the line with the local police. "There's a man loitering at the apartment building across the street," Linda said, her tone urgent. "I think he might be trying to break in. You need to send someone right away." The dispatcher assured her that officers were on their way, and Linda hung up, feeling a self-satisfied sense of accomplishment. Unaware of the call, the man continued unloading his belongings, humming softly to himself. He had just carried a large box inside when two police cars pulled up, their flashing lights drawing the attention of the entire block. Linda stepped onto her porch, folding her arms as she watched the scene unfold. The officers approached the man who had just emerged from the building. "Excuse me, sir," one of the officers said. "We received a report about suspicious activity here. Can you tell us what you're doing?" The man looked up, surprised but calm. "I'm moving in," he replied, gesturing to the truck. "Is there a problem?" The officers exchanged a glance. "Do you have any ID or paperwork to prove that?" "Of course," the man said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a set of documents and handed them to the officer. Linda smirked from her porch, confident she had done her civic duty. But her smugness quickly faded as she saw the officer's expression change. "Mr. Daniels," the officer said, his tone respectful. "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. Everything checks out. Have a good day." The man, now revealed as Mr. Terrence Daniels, nodded politely. "No problem, officer. Thank you." Linda's jaw dropped as the officers returned to their cars. Who was this man? And why did they seem so deferential to him? What Linda didn't realize was that Terrence Daniels wasn't just moving in. He was the new owner of the entire building. And Linda's assumptions were about to cost her dearly. As the police cars drove away, Linda stood frozen on her porch, watching Terrence Daniels return to his moving truck. She had expected a different outcome, a scene confirming her assumptions. But instead, her suspicions had been dismissed and now she was left with unanswered questions. Terrence, meanwhile, continued unloading his belongings with a calm efficiency. But as he carried a box toward the building, he noticed Linda staring at him from across the street. He paused, adjusted the box in his arms, and gave her a polite nod. Linda didn't return the gesture. Instead, she retreated into her house, determined to find out more about him. The next morning, Terrence was back at the building inspecting the property. He greeted tenants warmly as they passed, introducing himself as the new landlord. Many were pleasantly surprised by his approachable demeanor. One tenant, an older man named Mr. Alvarez, stopped to chat. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Daniels. I've lived here for 10 years, and we've had some pretty inattentive landlords. I hope things will be different with you." Terrence smiled. "That's the plan, Mr. Alvarez. I want this building to feel like home for everyone. If there's anything you need, let me know." Linda, who was once again watching from her window, overheard the conversation and felt her heart sink. "He's the landlord?" she whispered to herself, her face flushing with embarrassment. Later that afternoon, Linda decided to approach Terrence under the guise of introducing herself. She crossed the street, putting on her best smile as he carried another box inside. "Hi there," she said, her voice overly cheerful. "I'm Linda Walker. I live right across the street." Terrence set the box down and turned to her. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Walker. I'm Terrence Daniels." She hesitated, searching for the right words. I heard you're the new landlord for this building." "That's right," Terrence replied, his tone neutral. "Well, welcome to the neighborhood," Linda said, forcing a laugh. "It's always nice to have responsible people around here." Terrence raised an eyebrow, clearly seeing through her attempt at pleasantries. "Thanks. I appreciate that." Before Linda could say more, a young couple approached Terrence, thanking him for the improvements he'd already begun making to the building. Linda watched, realizing that Terrence wasn't just well-liked, he was respected. As she walked back to her house, Linda's mind raced. She had misjudged him, and now her own actions might come back to haunt her. That evening, Terrence reviewed tenant files in his office. One name stood out: Linda Walker. She owned a unit in the building as a rental property, but her late payments and complaints about other tenants were well documented. Terrence leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. Linda had made her judgment clear when she called the cops. Now, it was time for him to make his own. The next morning, Linda received a letter taped to her front door. The envelope bore the letterhead of Daniels Property Management, and her stomach sank as she opened it. Inside was an invitation to meet with Terrence Daniels at his office in the apartment building that afternoon. The note was brief and professional. "Dear Ms. Walker, I would like to discuss your rental property in the building. Please meet me in the office today at 2 p.m. Best regards, Terrence Daniels." Linda's hands trembled as she read the note. She had a sinking feeling that her hasty call to the police was about to come back to haunt her. At 2 p.m. sharp, Linda arrived at the building and entered the newly refurbished management office. The space was bright and welcoming, with clean lines and modern furniture. Behind the desk sat Terrence, his calm and composed demeanor contrasting sharply with Linda's nervous energy. "Ms. Walker," Terrence said, standing to greet her. "Thank you for coming." Linda forced a smile. "Of course, Mr. Daniels. What can I do for you?" Terrence gestured for her to sit before taking his own seat across from her. He opened a folder on the desk, glancing at the documents inside. "As you may know, I recently acquired this property," Terrence began. "In reviewing the records, I came across some concerns regarding your unit." Linda's heart raced. "Concerns? What kind of concerns?" Terrence tapped the folder lightly. "For one, there have been multiple complaints from your tenants about unresolved maintenance issues and a lack of communication. Additionally, your account shows several instances of late payments for HOA fees." Linda opened her mouth to respond, but Terrence held up a hand. "I believe in giving people the opportunity to address these issues," he continued. "However, your recent actions have raised another concern. You called the police on me while I was moving into my own building." Linda's face turned bright red. I didn't realize you were the owner," she stammered. You thought I didn't belong," Terrence said, his tone firm but controlled. "You made an assumption, and that assumption could have led to unnecessary consequences." Linda's voice faltered. "I'm sorry, Mr. Daniels, it was a mistake." Terrence nodded. "I appreciate the apology, but this isn't just about me. Your behavior reflects poorly on this community, and as the landlord, it's my responsibility to ensure this property is a safe and welcoming space for everyone." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "As such, I've decided not to renew your lease for the unit. You'll have 60 days to vacate and settle any outstanding balances." Linda's eyes widened. "But you can't do that." "I can, Ms. Walker," Terrence said calmly. "And I will. I suggest you use this time to reflect on your actions and how they've affected others." Linda sat in stunned silence, realizing there was nothing she could say to change his mind. The news of Linda's eviction spread quickly among the building's tenants and neighboring residents. While some were shocked, others weren't surprised. Her reputation as a judgmental and overly nosy neighbor had been well established long before Terrence Daniels moved in. Linda, meanwhile, found herself grappling with a mix of embarrassment, anger, and regret. She couldn't believe her actions had led to this outcome, and for the first time in years, she felt truly humbled. Terrence, however, remained focused on improving the building and fostering a sense of community. He began hosting monthly tenant meetings where residents could share their concerns and suggestions. One evening, during one of these meetings, Mr. Alvarez, the longtime tenant, stood up to speak. "I've lived here for over a decade," he began, addressing the group. and I've never seen a landlord care this much about the people who live here. Mr. Daniels, thank you for listening to us and making this building feel like a home again." The room erupted in applause, and Terrence nodded graciously. "It's not just about the building," Terrence said. "It's about the people who live here. Everyone deserves to feel respected and valued, no matter who they are." His words resonated with the tenants, many of whom had experienced firsthand the changes he was bringing to the community. Meanwhile, Linda's attempts to appeal the eviction were unsuccessful. The legalities were clear, and she had no choice but to comply with the notice. As she packed up her belongings, she found herself reflecting on the events that had led her to this point. One afternoon, as she carried a box to her car, she saw Terrence walking toward the building. He noticed her struggling and, to her surprise, stopped to help. "Let me get that for you," he said, taking the box from her hands. Linda blinked, momentarily stunned. "You're helping me?" Terrence gave her a small smile. "I believe in treating people with kindness, even when they've made mistakes. That's the kind of community I want to build here." Linda looked down, her voice soft. "I'm sorry for what I did. I judged you without knowing anything about you, and it was wrong." Terrence nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Apology accepted, but it's important to remember that actions have consequences, Ms. Walker. Use this experience to grow." As he walked away, Linda felt a mixture of gratitude and shame. For the first time, she truly understood the impact of her actions. By the time Linda's move was complete, she had started to change in small but meaningful ways. She avoided making snap judgments and began treating people with more respect. For Terrence, the incident became a symbol of the importance of accountability and empathy. Lessons he continued to carry forward as he worked to improve the lives of his tenants. Months after Linda's departure, the apartment building at Pinewood Heights had undergone a remarkable transformation. Terrence Daniels had not only made physical improvements to the property, upgraded plumbing, fresh paint, and enhanced security, but had also fostered a strong sense of community among the residents. The monthly tenant meetings became a cornerstone of this transformation. Neighbors who once barely acknowledged each other now collaborated on community projects, from organizing a small garden in the courtyard to hosting potluck dinners. Terrence's leadership had turned the building into more than just a place to live. It was now a thriving community. One Saturday afternoon, Terrence hosted a block party in the building's courtyard. The event featured food trucks, music, and activities for families. Residents from neighboring buildings and houses were invited, creating a lively and inclusive atmosphere. As Terrence mingled with the crowd, he noticed Mr. Alvarez chatting with a group of new tenants. "This place used to be so different," Mr. Alvarez said, gesturing to the courtyard. "We didn't even know our neighbors back then, but Mr. Daniels changed everything." The group nodded in agreement, and one of the newer tenants said, "It's not every day you find a landlord who actually cares." Terrence smiled as he overheard the conversation. His goal had always been to create a space where everyone felt respected and valued, and seeing it come to life was deeply fulfilling. Meanwhile, Linda, now living in a nearby neighborhood, had been following the changes from afar. While she initially felt bitter about her eviction, she couldn't deny the positive impact Terrence had made. One day she wrote him a letter. "Dear Mr. Daniels, I wanted to thank you for teaching me an important lesson. I've spent much of my life making assumptions about people, but meeting you showed me how wrong I was. I regret my actions and the way I treated you, and I hope to carry this lesson forward. I wish you all the best in the community you've built." Terrence read the letter and folded it neatly, placing it in his desk drawer. He appreciated Linda's willingness to acknowledge her mistakes, but for him, the true reward was the thriving community he had worked to create. As the block party wound down, Terrence stood at the edge of the courtyard, watching children play and neighbors laugh together. For a moment, he reflected on how a single painful experience had sparked something much larger, a chance to change lives, challenge assumptions, and build a better future. For Terrence, being a landlord wasn't just about owning property. It was about creating a space where everyone, regardless of their background, could feel at home.